Have you ever looked at an ancient map and felt that something did not quite add up? Welcome, and today we are exploring one of history's quiet but fascinating mysteries. Why some ancient maps seem to show lands that people supposedly should not have known about. At first glance, these old maps can feel unsettling. Coastlines appear strangely accurate. Large landmasses show up where modern textbooks say no one had explored yet. To a modern viewer, raised on satellites and GPS, it is tempting to assume something extraordinary must be missing from the story. Were ancient civilizations more advanced than we believe? Did knowledge survive from an earlier, forgotten age? This sense of mystery comes largely from how we interpret the past through modern expectations. We often imagine ancient people as isolated, slow-moving, and limited in what they could know. But history tells a different story. Long before the modern era, humans traveled widely through trade routes, maritime exploration, and cultural exchange. Information moved slowly, but it did move sometimes across continents and generations. Ancient maps were not created to be perfect representations of the world as we see it today. They were practical tools, belief systems, and records of shared knowledge all at once. Mapmakers gathered information from sailors, merchants, travelers, and older documents. They combined first-hand observation with educated guesses and widely accepted theories of their time. When a map appears to show a forbidden land, it is often the result of this layered process rather than secret knowledge. Our modern surprise comes from assuming that discovery happens in clean, official moments, when in reality it unfolds gradually, unevenly, and across many cultures. Understanding this helps us shift the question. Instead of asking, "How did they know this?" we begin asking something more interesting: how did human knowledge slowly build, spread, and transform long before the modern world existed? And that is where the real story begins. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer, is often presented as one of history's greatest anomalies. The most dramatic claim surrounding it is that it shows Antarctica centuries before the continent was officially discovered. At first glance, this idea feels convincing, especially when parts of the southern coastline appear unfamiliar or oddly shaped. However, a closer examination tells a far more grounded story. Piri Reis himself left detailed notes explaining how the map was made. He stated clearly that it was a compilation of earlier sources, including Portuguese nautical charts, Arabic maps, and reports from sailors who had traveled along newly explored coasts. This matters because it shows the map was not the product of a single moment of discovery, but rather the result of accumulated information from multiple cultures and voyages. The coastline often identified as Antarctica aligns more closely with a distorted version of South America. Early cartographers struggled with scale, longitude, and projection, especially when working without precise instruments. When coastlines were stitched together from separate journeys, stretching and bending of land shapes was almost unavoidable. What looks precise to modern eyes can often be explained by guesswork filling in unknown areas. Another important factor is expectation. Once people began searching for mysteries in ancient maps, they started matching shapes to modern geography, sometimes forcing similarities that were never intended. Scientific studies of Antarctica show that its ice-free coastline could not have been observed or mapped with the tools available in the 16th century. Rather than revealing forbidden knowledge, the Piri Reis map demonstrates something more impressive: how quickly new information spread during the age of exploration. It captures a moment when the world was being redrawn in real time, with accuracy improving through trial, error, and shared experience. The mystery fades, but the human achievement remains remarkable. When historians and cartographers analyze the disputed section of the Piri Reis map, most reach the same conclusion: the coastline in question matches South America, not an unknown or hidden continent. This interpretation is based on careful comparison rather than speculation. Key features such as the curvature of the coast, the placement of rivers, and relative distances align more closely with the eastern edge of South America as it was gradually being explored in the early 1500s. One major source of confusion comes from map projection. Early cartographers lacked reliable methods to calculate longitude, which often caused landmasses to stretch or compress horizontally. When coastlines drawn from separate voyages were combined into a single map, distortions naturally occurred. As a result, familiar regions can appear unfamiliar, especially when viewed through a modern lens. Another factor is incomplete knowledge. Explorers had mapped only portions of South America's coastline by 1513. Large areas remained unknown, forcing mapmakers to estimate how the land might continue beyond known points. These estimates were not random. They followed the direction of the coast and prevailing geographic assumptions of the time. Over time, these guesses hardened into drawn coastlines that later viewers misinterpreted as deliberate accuracy. Scholars also point out that if the map truly depicted Antarctica, it would conflict with established geological and climatic evidence. Antarctica's coastline lies beneath massive ice sheets that have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. There is no credible evidence that humans could have surveyed or recorded those coastlines in a recognizable way during the early modern period. What makes this discussion valuable is not the search for mystery, but the insight it provides into how knowledge evolves. The Piri Reis map reflects a transitional moment, when partial discoveries were stitched together into a broader picture of the world. Its inaccuracies are not failures. They are signs of learning in progress. Understanding this helps separate visual coincidence from historical reality and keeps the focus on evidence rather than imagination. One of the most misunderstood aspects of ancient maps is the phrase copied from older sources. When Piri Reis and other cartographers mentioned using earlier materials, some modern interpretations jumped to the idea of lost advanced civilizations. In reality, this statement reflects a normal and well-documented practice in historical mapmaking. Cartography before the modern era was cumulative. Mapmakers rarely started from scratch. They collected fragments of knowledge from many places: sailor logs, port records, traveler descriptions, earlier maps, and oral reports. Each new map was a layered document, combining what was known with what was assumed. Older sources did not imply ancient global surveys, but rather regional charts that had already circulated through trade networks. Portuguese explorers, for example, guarded their nautical charts closely, yet fragments of this knowledge still spread across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Arabic and Mediterranean scholars had long traditions of geographic documentation, some of which predated European exploration efforts. When Piri Reis referenced older maps, he was acknowledging this shared informational ecosystem. Another important detail is that older sources often contradicted one another. Mapmakers had to decide which details to trust and how to merge conflicting information. This process naturally produced inaccuracies, overlaps, and exaggerated features. These flaws are sometimes mistaken today for hidden precision, when they are actually signs of uncertainty. There is also no physical evidence supporting the existence of ancient, highly advanced civilizations capable of global cartographic surveys. Archaeology, geology, and climate science all point to gradual human development, not sudden peaks of forgotten technology. If such civilizations had existed, their tools, settlements, and infrastructure would have left clear traces. Understanding this context reframes ancient maps as records of collaboration, rather than secrets. They show how knowledge survived, evolved, and crossed cultural boundaries. The real achievement lies not in imagined lost worlds, but in the human ability to preserve information across generations, even when the world itself was only partially understood. For centuries, mapmakers believed in the existence of a vast southern continent known as Terra Australis. This land was not discovered through exploration, but through philosophical reasoning. Many scholars in ancient and medieval times thought the Earth required balance, meaning the land in the northern hemisphere had to be matched by an equally large landmass in the south. This idea became deeply rooted in geographic thinking. As a result, mapmakers routinely drew an enormous southern continent even though no one had directly observed it. These depictions were not meant to deceive. They reflected what educated people believed was logically necessary. Over time, the imagined continent took on rivers, mountain ranges, and coastlines, giving it the appearance of a real, explored land. When later viewers examine these maps, the level of detail can seem suspicious. However, the details were often copied and refined from earlier speculative maps rather than real surveys. Once a feature appeared on a respected map, it was likely to be repeated by others, reinforcing the illusion of accuracy. This repetition created consistency, not confirmation. The eventual discovery of Australia and Antarctica complicated the myth. Explorers found land in the southern oceans, but it did not match the massive, continuous continent that maps had predicted. As real geographic data increased, Terra Australis slowly shrank and disappeared from maps altogether. This process highlights an important truth about historical cartography. Maps were shaped as much by ideas as by evidence. They recorded what people believed about the world, not just what they had seen. The presence of Terra Australis does not point to hidden knowledge, but to how human reasoning can fill gaps in understanding. By studying these maps carefully, historians can trace the moment when theory gave way to observation. In doing so, they reveal how assumptions influence perception, and how even widely accepted ideas eventually yield to evidence. The 1531 map by Orontes Phineus is often cited as striking evidence that ancient cartographers possessed advanced knowledge of the southern continents. At first glance, the map appears unusually detailed, showing rivers, mountain ranges, and a clearly defined southern landmass. To modern viewers, this level of detail can feel difficult to explain without assuming first-hand exploration. However, the apparent accuracy of the map is largely an illusion created by expectation and selective comparison. Orontes Phineus was working within the long-standing tradition of Terra Australis. His map did not emerge from new discoveries, but from existing geographic theories and earlier speculative charts. The features drawn onto the southern continent were artistic and philosophical additions, not records of observed terrain. Mapmakers of the time often filled unknown regions with familiar elements. Rivers, for example, symbolized fertility and balance, while mountains suggested structure and permanence. These features made maps feel complete and believable, even when the lands depicted were hypothetical. The goal was coherence, not scientific precision. When Antarctica was finally explored centuries later, its actual shape and geography did not match the depictions found on Phineus's map. The continent's interior is dominated by ice, not river systems, and its coastline differs significantly from early representations. This mismatch confirms that the map was not based on direct knowledge. What makes the Orontes Phineus map important is not hidden accuracy, but its role in illustrating how ideas persist. It shows how geographic assumptions can harden into visual facts when repeated across generations. Once drawn, imagined landscapes can feel real. Rather than proving lost civilizations or secret discoveries, the map reveals the power of belief in shaping knowledge. It stands as a reminder that maps tell stories about the minds that created them, reflecting how people tried to understand the world long before modern exploration provided clearer answers. In the medieval and Renaissance periods, maps were not designed to separate fact from speculation in the way modern maps do. They were hybrids, combining what had been seen with what was believed to be true. This blending is one of the main reasons ancient maps can feel confusing or misleading when viewed today. Mapmakers worked with incomplete and uneven information. Coastal regions visited by sailors were often drawn with relative confidence, while inland areas remained largely unknown. Instead of leaving these spaces blank, cartographers filled them using widely accepted ideas, classical texts, and traveler stories. These additions were not meant as deliberate falsehoods, but as reasonable interpretations based on the knowledge available at the time. Religious and philosophical beliefs also influenced map design. Some maps reflected ideas about symmetry, balance, or divine order. Others included symbolic elements to convey moral or cultural messages. In these cases, accuracy was less important than meaning. The map was a way to explain how the world was thought to work, not just where places were located. This practice creates confusion for modern audiences. When we see a detailed feature on an ancient map, we instinctively assume it was observed. In reality, that feature might represent belief, tradition, or logical deduction rather than direct experience. Without understanding this context, it is easy to mistake symbolic geography for evidence of advanced exploration. The blending of observation and belief explains why some maps contain both remarkably accurate coastlines and clearly fictional elements. Accuracy did not arrive all at once. It emerged gradually as exploration replaced theory. Recognizing this helps dissolve much of the mystery surrounding ancient maps. They were not secret documents hiding forbidden knowledge. They were working tools shaped by human limits, creativity, and the desire to make sense of an incomplete world. Understanding this mindset allows us to appreciate ancient cartography for what it truly was: a bridge between imagination and discovery. Portolan maps are often cited as evidence that medieval sailors possessed knowledge far beyond what should have been possible at the time. These nautical charts, first appearing in the 13th century, display coastlines of the Mediterranean and nearby seas with striking precision. To modern viewers, their accuracy can feel almost out of place in a pre-modern world. The key to understanding Portolan maps lies in their purpose. They were not meant to represent the entire world, nor were they designed to explain geography in a theoretical sense. Their function was practical and specific, to help sailors navigate safely from port to port. Because lives, cargo, and trade depended on them, accuracy along coastlines mattered far more than inland detail. These maps were refined over generations. Sailors constantly updated them based on direct experience, correcting distances, angles, and landmarks. When a harbor was misrepresented, someone eventually noticed and fixed it. This slow process of trial and correction produced charts that became increasingly reliable, even without modern instruments. Another reason for their precision is scope. Portolan maps covered limited regions rather than the entire globe. By focusing on known sailing routes, mapmakers could achieve high accuracy without needing advanced mathematical models of the Earth. Compass bearings and estimated distances were enough when applied consistently. Importantly, these maps often appear impressive because we compare them selectively. We focus on the coastlines that match modern maps and overlook the areas where Portolan charts are vague, distorted, or completely blank. Their success was situational, not universal. Portolan maps do not point to secret technologies or lost knowledge. Instead, they demonstrate what humans can achieve through repeated observation and shared experience. They are reminders that precision does not always require advanced tools, only sustained attention, collaboration, and a clear goal. The accuracy seen in many ancient and medieval maps is best explained by necessity rather than advanced technology. Sailors depended on maps to survive. A small mistake in direction or distance could mean shipwreck, lost cargo, or failure to return home. This pressure forced navigators to focus intensely on what mattered most: reliable routes and recognizable landmarks. Because of this, map accuracy developed unevenly. Coastal outlines, harbors, and sea routes received constant attention, while inland regions remained vague or symbolic. This imbalance can give the false impression that mapmakers had deep knowledge of some areas and mysterious insight into others. In reality, they were simply prioritizing information that had immediate practical value. Navigation was a collective process. Each voyage added small corrections to existing charts. When several sailors reported the same feature, it gained credibility. When reports conflicted, mapmakers adjusted gradually. Over time, this system created charts that were surprisingly dependable within their intended context. This explains why ancient maps often fail when judged by modern standards. They were not designed for global measurement or scientific precision. They were tools built for specific environments and tasks. Judging them outside that framework leads to misunderstanding. The impression of impossible accuracy also comes from hindsight. Once modern maps confirm certain coastlines, earlier representations seem prophetic. But accuracy recognized after the fact does not mean it was achieved through extraordinary means. It simply means some observations happened to be correct. Understanding the practical limits and goals of early navigation helps strip away the mystery. Ancient mapmakers were not unlocking hidden truths about the Earth. They were solving immediate, real-world problems using observation, repetition, and experience. Their success lies in human adaptability, not in forgotten science. A major reason ancient maps seem mysterious today is that we often underestimate how connected the ancient world truly was. Long before modern transportation, trade routes linked distant regions through land and sea. Merchants, sailors, diplomats, and scholars carried information along with goods, allowing geographic knowledge to spread far beyond its point of origin. These exchanges did not happen instantly, but they were persistent. A coastline explored by one culture could appear on a map hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away within a few decades. Each retelling added small changes, but the core information survived. Over time, repeated transmissions strengthened certain details while erasing others. Written records were only one part of this system. Oral reports played a significant role, especially among sailors. Directions, landmarks, currents, and hazards were memorized and shared long before they were formally recorded. When mapmakers collected these accounts, they transformed experience into visual form. This process explains why maps sometimes contain accurate features in unexpected places. It was not that one civilization explored the entire world, but that many groups contributed pieces of knowledge. When those pieces were combined, the result could appear surprisingly advanced. The modern tendency to credit discovery to a single moment or explorer distorts this reality. Knowledge rarely appears fully formed. It grows through accumulation, correction, and collaboration across cultures. Recognizing this challenges the idea that ancient people were isolated or uninformed. They operated within networks that spanned continents. Maps were one of the few places where this shared understanding became visible. By appreciating the scale of ancient knowledge exchange, the mystery fades. What remains is a picture of humanity steadily mapping its surroundings through movement, communication, and cooperation, long before the age of satellites and global positioning systems. Claims that ancient maps prove the existence of lost, highly advanced civilizations are popular, but they are not supported by credible evidence. These ideas often arise from focusing on a few accurate-looking features while ignoring the broader historical and scientific context in which the maps were created. If an ancient civilization had possessed advanced surveying technology or global geographic knowledge, it would have left clear traces behind. Large-scale infrastructure, specialized tools, written records, and consistent artifacts would appear across multiple regions. Archaeology has uncovered none of this. Instead, the evidence points to gradual technological development, not sudden peaks followed by total disappearance. Geology and climate science also challenge these claims. Some theories suggest ancient mapmakers recorded ice-free coastlines of Antarctica. However, scientific data shows that Antarctica has been covered by thick ice sheets for hundreds of thousands of years. There is no window in human history when its coastline could have been directly observed and mapped in detail. Another issue is selective interpretation. Supporters of lost civilization theories often match parts of old maps to modern geography while ignoring mismatches, distortions, and clearly fictional elements. When only the correct parts are highlighted, coincidence can be mistaken for intention. Historical records further weaken these claims. Ancient and medieval mapmakers documented their methods, sources, and limitations. They described uncertainty openly and relied on second-hand reports. There is no mention of inherited global knowledge or advanced instruments beyond what archaeology confirms. The appeal of lost civilizations often says more about modern imagination than ancient reality. These stories offer dramatic explanations, but history is usually less dramatic and more complex. Progress tends to be uneven, built through small steps rather than sudden breakthroughs. By relying on evidence instead of speculation, historians can distinguish between coincidence and capability. Ancient maps remain fascinating documents, but they reflect human learning in progress, not the remnants of a forgotten global civilization. When ancient maps are viewed as a whole rather than as isolated curiosities, a clearer picture emerges. They do not reveal hidden continents or forgotten technologies. Instead, they document how humans slowly tried to understand a world that was only partially known. Every line on these maps represents a decision made with limited information, shaped by experience, belief, and necessity. Ancient maps capture moments of transition. They show knowledge in motion, not knowledge completed. Coastlines become sharper over time, speculative lands fade away, and imagined features are replaced by observed ones. This gradual refinement reflects how discovery actually works: uneven, collaborative, and often uncertain. These maps also highlight the human urge to fill gaps. When information was missing, mapmakers relied on logic, tradition, or widely accepted ideas. This was not deception, but an attempt to make sense of uncertainty. Leaving blank spaces felt incomplete, so imagination stepped in where evidence had not yet arrived. What makes these documents powerful is not their accuracy by modern standards, but their honesty. Many mapmakers openly acknowledge doubt, conflicting sources, and unknown regions. Their work shows humility rather than hidden mastery. They expected future generations to correct them. Modern viewers sometimes project mystery onto these maps because we approach them backward, starting with what we now know. When a shape vaguely resembles a modern coastline, it feels prophetic. But when placed back into its original context, it becomes clear that coincidence, approximation, and assumption play a far greater role than secret knowledge. Ultimately, ancient maps are records of human curiosity. They show how people shared information across cultures, learned from mistakes, and refined understanding over centuries. They remind us that knowledge is not uncovered all at once, but built slowly through observation, communication, and correction. The real wonder is not that ancient people knew too much, but that they knew as much as they did with so little. These maps stand as evidence of humanity's persistent effort to understand its place in the world, long before modern tools made that task easier. When we step back and look at ancient maps as a whole, the mystery changes shape. What once seemed like forbidden knowledge or impossible accuracy becomes something far more human. These maps are not evidence of lost worlds or forgotten technologies. They are records of curiosity, communication, and gradual understanding. Ancient mapmakers worked with fragment stories from sailors, reports from traders, inherited ideas, and hard-earned observations. They made sense of uncertainty the only way they could, by drawing, revising, and passing knowledge forward. Some details turned out to be right, others wrong, and many somewhere in between. That balance is exactly what we should expect from a world still being explored. What makes these maps remarkable is not that they reveal secrets, but that they reveal process. They show how humans learn collectively, how assumptions guide early thinking, and how evidence slowly replaces belief. Each map is a snapshot of understanding at a specific moment in time, not a final answer. By viewing ancient maps in their proper context, we do not lose the wonder, we deepen it. The real story is not about hidden continents, but about how much could be achieved with limited tools, shared experience, and relentless curiosity. Thank you for exploring this journey through history with us. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more moments where the past quietly challenges our assumptions, do not forget to like, subscribe, and join us again next time. See you in the next story.